Okay, so we're starting a new topic. I actually waited with this because for a few sessions we discussed issues that have to do with the war. I have to tell you, I don't have to tell everybody what a difficult time it is, but we are just fresh into another piece of devastating news. One other boy from Ra'anana, who is a friend of children and nephews and children and of friends of ours and so on. In the last few hours, we were notified about 3 soldiers who were killed. One of them is from Mishpachat Gringlik, Ra'anana, Shauli Gringlik. We'll probably find out sometime tonight or tomorrow morning about a time of a funeral, whether it will be in Ra'anana or how Herzl, as some people do, we will find out. So for the benefit, for the well-being of all our soldiers, of all of Am Yisrael, of everyone, all those who are injured, and so on, Leilui Neshama of Shauli Gringlik and other soldiers who were killed, we dedicate our learning. We want to discuss the question, is the Torah, does it encourage diversity of opinions, or does it discourage it? Does it want unity of opinions? And we also promise to discuss different denominations within Judaism. We usually speak about the major 3, which would be Orthodoxy, Conservative, and Reform. Some people raise also, what is it called? Help me out here. Reconstructionist. Thank you. Reconstructionist. And probably there are some other small sects that I'm not very well familiarized with. Yes, Ilana?
I learned something new when I was in the States. Post-denominational.
Post-denominational. Okay.
What is that?
That's like post-opinionational.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Post-denominational. Not
Okay.
not connected to officially
Right.
to any denomination, unlabeled.
Okay, I can understand in the sense that in Israeli society, this is also a sensitive issue. I do not want to be defined by my opinions and beliefs. I don't want to put down on a form, are you Dati, Chiloni, Masorti, Haredi? I want to be Jewish. I want to be part of Am Yisrael. Maybe I want to be human and part of the world. And there's certainly a lot of value in that. But at the same time, you also have to decide how you're going to live. And you know what? This is part of the question. That Ilana, that's a very good entrance into the topic, because can we actually live that way and just everybody love everybody and not have to define ourselves and our beliefs and our, I don't have to be part of a group, but I do have to decide what my opinions are, and also what are my opinions about other people's opinions. I don't have to fight with them or hate them, chas v'chalila, because they have opinions that are different than me. But even to that, we have to draw a line. And I'm not talking about wars with enemies, but how about struggles with people who do things against you? They're not picking up weapons against you, even though it becomes sadly very difficult to draw the line. If you think of Jewish students in campuses in, of all places in the world, the United States of America, sometimes it's being cursed and being yelled at and things like that, or being shunned or being ostracized, whatever you'll say about it. But sometimes they have to lock themselves up in the library to keep safe. So if you can, violent speech sometimes becomes physical violence, and we have to be careful of that. We have to be careful of that in our own actions. But we also have to decide, okay, so where do we draw the line? Where is it legitimate to argue, to struggle against a certain opinion in constructive and reasonable ways and frameworks, not to go to war with other people. So all these are issues that we will want to discuss. We have a long journey ahead of us. There are a lot of issues and sources to discuss. I think we always like to open and show how beautiful diversity of opinions is. And we speak about Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, and the famous Gemara in Masechet Eruvin that says that they had a big argument, and then there was a voice coming out of heaven, Bat Kol, that says, Eilu va'eilu divrei Elohim chayim. both Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are the word of God. How can that be? And halakha is like Beit Hillel and all that, but there's value to the different opinions. In a way, I want to connect it to Parashat Shavua, because Parashat Shavua this Shabbat is going to be Parashat Vayechi, where Yaakov gives individual blessings, or not always blessings. Some of his comments are not so blessful, but nonetheless, because the Torah says that he gives brachot, blessings to all of them, so apparently even those who he criticizes in his words, he also gives them some form of blessing. But we meet the different tribes, and it's very interesting. We meet the different tribes. I'm giving you a promo for this week's Dvar Torah video that I'd like to discuss becoming a nation, growing from individuals to a family to a nation, because next Shabbat we're going to meet the nation of Am Yisrael, and a nation being enslaved in Mitzrayim. So the move from individuals to a family to a nation, there are tribes. Why are there tribes? Why can't we just all be the sons of Yaakov? Why do we have to have tribes? And the honest, I think part of the truth, part of the reason is, well, we're not going to get into it in depth. Part of the reason is because there are going to be tribes, whether you like it or not. There are going to be different groups with different characters, characteristics, opinions. So let's recognize that there are tribes and deal with it and teach ourselves to get along between the different tribes and to understand that there are tribes that are different than my tribe and so on. And maybe it's important to notice and to note that there are different tribes so that we won't end up clashing over every difference between every two tribes. So maybe that has some value in this week's parasha. And because if we separate into tribes, we'll never be a nation. We'll keep on separating, breaking ourselves up into small particles and never actually functioning and existing as a nation. So that's an important point. But today I'd like to start off with the opposite of the spectrum, meaning I want to say some things, I want to study some things that are more problematic or maybe give a negative vibe to the idea of diversity. So I'm going to start with a source that I gave you on the sheet. I'm going to share the screen. There we go. This is a source that is quoted in the Gemara, in Masechet Sanhedrin, in the Babylonian Talmud, the Gemara in the Masechet Sanhedrin, and it's actually the source is in Tanaic sources, meaning the Talmud, the Gemara, is from the area of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, maybe 6th centuries after, after the Christian era, and the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah, originate in the time of the Second Temple, 100 or 200 years, or maybe more in some ways before Christian era and before the destruction of the Mikdash in the year 70, and continue until the second or the border of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and from then on into the Talmud. So the sources are from the time of the Tanaim in a compilation called the Tosefta, certain sources of the time of the Tanaim. I'm going to quote it here from the Talmud, from the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, because this I found in English. So I'm telling you the sources from the Tanaim, but it's quoted in the Gemara. I looked for those Toseftot in English and did not find them online, and I did find the Gemara, so here we have it. It has been taught. Rabbi Yossi said, originally there were not many disputes in Israel. There were not a lot of, in the words in Hebrew, lo rabu machlokot. There were not a lot of disagreements and disputes within the Torah. How can it be? I mean, weren't the sages Jewish? How can it be that there weren't many disputes? But the reason is, but one Beit Din of 71 members sat in the hall of, please help me out how to express this word. Hewn stone.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Hewn stones.
Hewn, you said it right.
And 2 courts of 23 sat, one at the entrance of the Temple Mount and one at the door of the Temple Court. And other courts of 23 sat in all Jewish cities, meaning there was a whole a whole complex, intricate setup of courts. The smallest court is a court of 3, and then there are courts of 23, and then there are courts of 71. And the high court of Am Yisrael was in the temple, in the Mikdash, in the hall of the hewn, did I get that right? Stones.
Human stones.
And it was the high court, and it made decisions for all of Am Yisrael. So the description is like this: if a matter of inquiry arose, the local Beit Din was consulted. If there were Jews, there was a dispute between two people on monetary issues. There was a question about how to keep Shabbat. There was a question about any other halacha from the Torah. So a local Beit Din was consulted. If they knew the answer, they gave the answer. I skipped all the details. And if they didn't know, they went to the next highest court. And if they had an answer, they answered. And if not, they went to the next highest court, and so on. And if they had to, they had to travel to Jerusalem, to the temple, and go to the first court, which was court number 3 in Jerusalem, near the temple. If they knew, good. If not, you went to the next one. If not, you have reached the highest authority. That is the Sanhedrin that is in Beit HaMikdash. So they all proceeded. If all the other courts did not have an answer, they all proceeded to the hall of the
Human stones.
hewn stones, okay, where they, i.e., the great Sanhedrin, sat from the
Hewn.
morning.
Hewn.
Hewn.
We said
Okay,
human.
okay, it's okay. From the morning tamid till the evening. Tamid is a word in Hebrew, but here it means a sacrifice. It's called tamid because it's a sacrifice that was brought tamid, always. It was brought every day. If it's a weekday or Shabbat or a Chag or Yom Kippur, the Korban Tamid is a Korban that was brought every morning and every evening meaning afternoon before dark. And the Tfilot that we say, Tfilat Shacharit and Tfilat Mincha, are parallel to these two Korbanot in Beit HaMikdash. So from the morning sacrifice until the evening sacrifice, Sanhedrin would sit in Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, and the question was brought before them. The question was then put before them. If they had a tradition, they stated it. If the high court in Yerushalayim, the great Sanhedrin, had a tradition as to what is the answer to the question, and the other courts did not know that, so they stated the tradition. If not, they took a vote. They took a vote is the short description of they started an inquiry. They discussed sources, they discussed considerations, they argued it out like good Jews, and in the end, how do you make a decision? You vote. And if the majority, for instance, it's a question of pure or impure, clean or unclean. If the majority voted unclean, so the decision was unclean. If the decision was the majority vote ruled clean, then the decision was clean. So what this source means, that originally there were not, as Rabbi Yossi says, there were not many disputes in Israel. It's not that there were not different opinions, but there was an orderly system of making decisions. And when the decision was brought before the high court, the great Sanhedrin, in the temple in Yerushalayim, the halakha was decided, and it was agreed upon, and everyone had to accept it. Even the minority that voted in the Sanhedrin had to accept that this was the decision. We'll get back to that in a moment. So when Rabbi Yossi says originally there were not many disputes in Israel, it doesn't mean there were not different opinions. It doesn't mean that not every Jew had two different opinions. It means that they created a discussion and a system of making decisions. They voted, and the majority vote was the halakha, and everyone accepted it because there was an agreed upon central authority that made the decisions, made the rulings, and everyone accepted it. And we do know of struggles within the Sanhedrin, but usually we do not know of periods of time with great demonstrations in the streets of Eretz Yisrael in those times, arguing, should we make a reform in the system or not? It was generally accepted. But, continues this source, when the disciples of Shammai and Hillel, Shammai and Hillel, in the 2nd century before the Christian era, there were five couples, meaning rabbis who led the Sanhedrin together, and they're brought in the 1st chapter of Masechet Sanhedrin. And the last of these couples, these chevrutot, duo of two Tanaim, the last of those 5 are Shammai and Hillel. And in the time of Shammai and Hillel, it's described in certain sources, there were very few disagreements, halachic disagreements between Shammai and Hillel. If you continue studying the oral Torah throughout the generations, you will find scores of disagreements between what then become to be known as Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, the disciples of Shammai and Hillel, after Shammai and Hillel, 2 generations after Shammai and Hillel, 3, 4 generations after Shammai and Hillel. The 3 disagreements in the time of Shammai and Hillel be a great big pile of so many disagreements. And the reason, says the Gemara here, says the Tanaic source of the Gemara here, is because of the disciples of Shammai and Hillel who had insufficiently studied. In the Hebrew is Mishirabu Talmidei Shammai v'Hillel Shelo Shimshu Kol Tzorkam. They were not careful in their studying from Shammai and Hillel. Here it's translated insufficiently studied. I might say they didn't work hard enough. They did something wrong in their studies, and the disagreements became so big in numbers. The disagreements increased in number. Disputes multiplied in Israel, and the Torah became as 2 Torot. And we are very wary of the Torah becoming 2 Torot. I'd like to give one example of the fear of the Torah becoming 2 Torah. There are 3 stories. I'll close the sharing for a while. There are 3 stories in the Talmud about a dispute between 2 of the Chachamim who might even be part of the houses of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. And they are Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabban Gamliel was the Nasiya Sanhedrin, the president, the head of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yoshua was one of the sages. And there are 3 stories about disputes where Rabban Gamliel is very forceful, acts very forcefully towards Rabbi Yoshua. One of them is about the question of the date of Yom Kippur. They had a disagreement, in the time of the Talmud, they would decide about the new month by seeing the new moon. They didn't have a set calendar. You think of it today, how do you set an event 3 months from now? You don't even know what the date will be. You say the Tuesday, maybe you say like the Tuesday after Parashat Vayikra. Because that what parsha will be read every Shabbat. You don't even know the date. They would decide the date. Every month could be 29 days or 30 days. On the 30th day, you looked for the new moon. If you saw it, so the 30th day became the first day of the next month. So the month was 29 days. If you didn't see the new moon, so that was the 30th day of the previous month, and the next day was the first day of the new month. Then there was an event that when they saw the new moon, and then it turned out that it was just a cloudy day and it wasn't the moon, it was a cloud. But they had already decided that the new month has started. So Rabban Gamliel said, we decided it's the first day of the new month. Rabbi Yoshua said, a woman cannot at the same time have given birth and be pregnant. Meaning you can't have it both ways. You can't, you didn't see the new moon, it was a cloud. So it wasn't the new moon. Tomorrow you're going to see the new moon. The new moon is going to be born tomorrow. She didn't give birth today. So Rabbi Yoshua disagreed, and he said it was the last day of the previous month. And this led to a disagreement between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. What day will be Yom Kippur. Because if the new month started, Yom Kippur will be on Monday. And if it was still the last day of the previous month, then Yom Kippur will only come on Tuesday. So there's a disagreement when Yom Kippur will be. And Rabban Gamliel acted very authoritative towards Rabbi Yoshua. And he said to him, I decree that you will come on Yom Kippur, on the day that for you is Yom Kippur, with your wallet and your staff, meaning in modern terms, you're going to get into your car on the date which is for you Yom Kippur, and you're going to drive to my court, and you're going to take out your credit card from your wallet, and you're going to make a transaction and show me and show everybody that you accept my decision about which day is Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Yoshua did. And on that Tuesday, that according to Rabban Gamliel was already the day after Yom Kippur, and according to Rabbi Yoshua was Yom Kippur, he came, everybody saw it, Rabban Gamliel greeted him, and the Mishnah and the Gemara, this whole story is brought in the Mishnah and the Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and Rabban Gamliel kisses him on his head, Neshako al Rosho, and he says to him, my teacher and my disciple. You are my teacher in Torah. Your knowledge of Torah is greater than mine. Your understanding of Torah is greater than mine. You're a greater sage than I am. And Talmidi, you are my disciple and that you accepted my ruling. Then there are two other stories where Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Yoshua disagrees with Rabban Gamliel, and Rabban Gamliel is teaching in the Beit Midrash with the sages, and he makes Rabbi Yoshua stand up, and he continues teaching, and he's embarrassing him. He's showing him, I am the authority. You can't disagree with me. Until in one case, the other sages stop the lesson, and in the third case, they overthrow Rabban Gamliel. Now, I don't want to discuss all the details of this. Rabban Gamliel was not just a vicious guy or someone who wanted to be a dictator. He had reasons for his way of handling this. I'm not going to get into that right now. And others had reasons for their disagreeing with him. But I do want to say that notice that in the second case, the sages stopped the lesson. And in the third case, they even overthrew Rabban Gamliel. In the first case, they did not react. Now, maybe they didn't react because it was the first and they didn't think it was going to continue. When it was the second time, they stopped the lesson. When it was the third time, they said, that's it. We've had enough. But maybe with the first issue, with the first event, they agreed. Because, let me say this, nowadays, we work with the Jewish calendar is based on something that was decided in the 4th century. They saw that the situation in Eretz Yisrael was weakening and deteriorating, and Bavel became the center of Jewish study, and you cannot decide on the new month in Galut out of Eretz Yisrael. So they made a decision about the Jewish calendar for thousands of years ahead. So we don't have to decide by the new month, by the new moon. Even when they decided by the new moon, they sometimes allowed themselves some flexibility. No, I don't want to look at the new moon today. I want it to be postponed for a day because I don't want Yom Kippur to be on Friday, and other reasons like that. So they have this area of flexibility, a little ability to maneuver, and they made decisions for the calendar of Am Yisrael for thousands of years ahead. You know, the Muslims, the Ramadan moves every year. When you look at the time of the year, the season of the year, it moves every year because the Muslims only have a lunar calendar. The Christians only have a solar calendar. And Am Yisrael has a mitzvah to make them coincide or work together. The mitzvah is written in the Torah when the Torah says that Pesach is always going to be in the Aviv, in the spring. And if we were like the Muslims, it would move all the time. And if we were like the Christians, it would have everything to do with the seasons, but nothing to do with the dates, which go by the moon. So we have to make this work out. So like this year is a Shana Me'uberet, a leap year. We have 13 months, 2 months of Adar, 7 such years every 19 years, so it works out. But everybody get worried now. there's a bug in the system. It goes wrong one day every 100 years. Okay? So everybody get very worried. In 1,000 years, we're going to be a week, 10 days back from where we're supposed to be. In 3,000 years, we're going to be a whole month off. That is very dangerous. So, well, we're not going to be here in 3,000 years, so someone else will have to worry about it. But at some point, somebody is going to have to make the decision. And let's say that the rabbi who will make the decision is a rabbi that I don't appreciate. I don't look up to him. I think he does some things that are really bad. I'm not hinting to anything. But let's say he has the authority to make this decision, and a good friend of mine or a rabbi that I look up to and appreciate very much is arguing with him. But the other one has the authority. I am going to support wholeheartedly, 100%, the rabbi that I don't like in making the decision. Because this is not an issue where you can have two Torah in Am Yisrael. That's what we say. I told you this whole story because of the term, the Torah became two Torah. You cannot have us having Yom Kippur on two different dates. The shuls on the southern side of Achuzah had Yom Kippur on Tuesday, and the shuls on the northern side of Achuzah had Yom Kippur on Wednesday. It can't be. We cannot function that way. Pesach is going to come out on different days. We can't do that. So the issue of the date has to be one decision in Am Yisrael. Where do we draw the line? That's the question that we're going to have to discuss. But what the Gemara is saying, when there was a high court with authority in Yerushalayim, in the Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, they made the decisions. They kept Am Yisrael within one framework of Torah. Once we lost that because of the Talmidim of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the disciples of Shammai and Hillel who did not properly conduct themselves in their study of Torah, and things began to become there was too much diversity, then the Torah became like two Torah, and that's very dangerous. So we are warning from the ability of being two Torah, as we have. I'm telling those who have joined us, what we do is we speak for a while, I speak for a while, and then we open up for discussion. So here goes Tova and Nitael, and anyone else who wants to speak up. Tova, go ahead.
I just want to mention that the reason that Canada has to be a certain way is because Pesach has to come in Aviv in the spring, and because of Pesach, they had to make sure that all the other holidays.
I will only say that it's expressed. It's said explicitly in the Torah about Pesach. Hayom atem yotzim bechodesh Aviv.
Chodesh Aviv, right?
But it's true about the other chagim as well. Sukkot also has to be in the fall,
Right.
and so on.
Right.
It all has to work out together.
Mm-hmm.
Nitael.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how the member of the Great Sanhedrin was elected or selected, and even the Nasi, of the Great Sanhedrin.
First of all, it was not democratic. The people didn't vote. There was no place for demagogy. All these, say demagogues could not be voted in because they're good at talking and not good at doing anything. But I understand that there are advantages to democracy as well. But it was not a democratic vote. It was decided. The people who were in the Sanhedrin, there were students who grew and became scholars, and there was a whole system of lines, before the high court. And if you were in a back line, that means you're a young student growing in Torah. And if you grew and became more learned and more scholarly, then you moved up a line. And the people in the front lines are the first ones on the front line are those who, when one of the judges in the Sanhedrin died, someone from the front line joined the Sanhedrin. But it was all within the Beit Midrash of studying. They were the ones who made the decisions. And it is a question that I ask. There are several reasons why we don't have, I shouldn't say can't have, why we don't have Sanhedrin today. One of them is because of what I said about the tribes. There is a group of people who created a Sanhedrin today. And I have to say, it seems to me, I want not to say this as strong as I feel it, but it seems to me to be, I want to say it respectfully, but forcefully. It seems to be a very weak decision to make, that you create a Sanhedrin, because everybody's going to create their own Sanhedrin. Big deal. What value does it have when a certain group of people create their Sanhedrin? It has to be a national decision. Right now, Am Yisrael, a lot of Am Yisrael are not interested in having a Sanhedrin. By the way, for those of you who are afraid of the Sanhedrin making horrible decisions, they're also the only ones who can make constructive decisions on changes that are needed. So I'm just saying, it's a two-edged, positive kind of sword. Okay, it's a two-edged
Sword.
not sword. I don't want to say sword. It's not negative. It's a two-edged something that can be used, that can be constructive, but it can go in all kinds of directions, and we have to accept what it decides. But not all of Am Yisrael is interested in it, and certainly we are not ready to make decisions together on who will be in the Sanhedrin. Oy vey. So we have to bring ourselves to a point where we can agree on how to decide on the Sanhedrin. I'll tell you one question that I am seriously asking. First of all, two questions. First of all, Nitael, will the system of voting be the same as us? Or will it be able to be different? Who's going to decide if it can be different or not? Who's going to nominate the Dayanim, or are going to decide if the system of nominating them has to be the same as it was 2,000 years ago, or can it be different? And another question is, will it be men like it was in the past, or can it be men and women? And who are the men and women who are going to decide if it can be only men or men and women? So there are some very serious obstacles and some very serious decisions that have to be made until we get there. For now, there isn't a Sanhedrin, but at the same time, we have to be wary about Am Yisrael remain in a certain agreed upon framework. And we're going to continue to discuss that aspect as we go on. Anyone here?
A couple of comments. One is I'm fascinated by the last sentence here. When the disciples of Shammai and Hillel had insufficiently studied, that increased the disputes. In other words, the disputes arose because people didn't know what they were talking about. Very interesting.
I'm not sure if it's insufficiently studied in terms of knowledge, understanding, or in terms of character traits. Torah is not only about knowledge; it's also about behavior, about attitudes towards things. So maybe they did not study well enough from their teachers, meaning they studied the material, the intellectual material. Maybe they did not learn from their teachers how to behave well enough, how to listen, how to respect different opinions, how to live in a system where you vote, but the vote goes against you, and you still remain unified with the decision that went against your opinion. As one example, one major example.
Another small point. The Gregorian calendar also has to make a correction every 100 years. Every 100 years is not a leap year. New century is not a leap year, except if it's a fourth century. In other words, 2000 was a leap year. 2100 will not be a leap year.
Thank you.
All correct.
Everybody, please remember that on December 31st. What is it?
In 2000.
2099.
2100, February 28th, and then March 1st. Remember,
You'll have to remind us.
I'll remind you. No, if I can remind you, I'll be delighted.
If we'll be able to understand.
We have a diaspora question.
Just 1 second. I want to ask Mark if 1 second, Mark. I want to ask Mark if Michael. I always get that confused. Is there a way for the Jewish religious leaders to talk to someone in the world and be able to plan those times that need to be adjusted in some kind of way that it will complement one another and it will be constructive for everyone? Meaning, the Jewish halakha halachic deciders will have a very difficult time to change one day from the plans that were made 2,000 years ago, or 1,600 years ago or so. Maybe if the people who handle the Gregorian
Calendar.
There are a
calendar
lot
will
of-
make a decision, change of one day.
There are a lot of very interesting, actually, because the Gregorian calendar was adopted in some countries and not adopted in other countries. Today, you have, for example, 2 days ago, you have a very interesting political in the Ukraine, because the Ukraine decided to celebrate Christmas on December 25. Why? Because they wanted to make a break with the Russians. The Russians celebrate in January because they are still on the Gregorian calendar before it was corrected. And there's another interesting story about that, and that has to do with the French Revolution. I don't want to take too much time, but there was a dispute in the 18th century because the French decided to jump from the Gregorian calendar that was not being corrected, the Julian calendar was not being corrected properly, and so there were 11 days difference between the Julian and solar calendar.
Right.
Decided all of a sudden, well, we're just going to jump by 11 days, but you still have to pay your rent for the whole month. Peasants were not happy, and that's one of the causes of the French Revolution.
It's a one.
One of the causes, yeah.
It's a one.
Yeah. But you know, it had profound consequences. But I have another question slightly. You cannot see the moon until about, at best, 36 hours after the actual new moon.
Mhm.
So I don't know. So they had to predate no matter what they did.
No, but it's when is the new moon? From when? That on the 28th day, on the 29th day?
Well, I mean, astronomically, there is a very precise time when the new moon happens. That's very precise time. But unless you have extremely good seeing conditions, you will not see the crescent moon, the early crescent moon, for on the order of 36 hours after that astronomical time. In other words, at least a day and a little bit more,
A day or and a little more after.
the actual occurrence.
Yeah, but the actual occurrence is on what day of the month?
That's
If it's on the 28th day, it still works out sometimes on the 29th day, sometimes only on the 30th day.
okay, but by the time you actually see the crescent,
Well, you don't have to see.
you're already
Because.
No, you see, the absence of the crescent is not enough to start to decide the new month. The new month is only when you see the new crescent.
so then the new month is defined as being the first or second day after the astronomical.
Yeah.
I guess.
They had to get to Jerusalem. The runners had to get to Jerusalem to tell
But he's
them.
raising a
So
different issue.
Yeah, details, forget it.
Okay, Michael.
Comment and a question. The comment is that I am sure that human nature will come into play in Ukraine, and there will be people that will prefer tradition over temporary politics, and they'll separate Christmas at two different times. I have no doubt about that. The question is, if we know for sure when Yom Kippur is, and that's established, then why do we have to have 2 days for the Hagim in the diaspora? Why can't we change that? My personal feeling is that there are a number of people in the diaspora that would almost certainly be more willing to be observant if they just had to celebrate one day.
First of all, let me thank my parents once again for making Aliyah. Not because of a second day of Yom Tov, because of a second night of Seder. One is, two is too much. I only remember I was 6 years old when we made Aliyah. I don't remember the Seder when I was 6 and 2 days old. I do remember a Seder when I was 14 and 2 days old. We were in the States for that year. But we only did one. We didn't do the second one. So I don't have that as an experience. I only have seen visitors in Israel going through the Seder on the second night, and I actually sat down and spent a little time with them. And without laughing at them, I said, okay, I enjoy your seder, and turned my back and laughed after I turned my back. But it's a good question, Michael. And I would say, first of all, the reason is the opposite way around, meaning, yes, we would have 2 days for Yom Kippur, but
People can fast 2 days.
the sages were very considerate of us. They didn't want us fasting for 49 hours.
Yes.
So they just left it at 1 day. But honestly, your question is better than that because it was based on how they passed on information in that time, and it was passed on with torches or with messengers, and they did not exactly have any one of the today's technological forms of media to pass on the information.
Right.
And today it takes exactly half a second after the decision was made to pass the decision on to everyone on every point on this planet, which raises the question that you're asking. And the Gemara already raises the question. The Gemara says that that the reason is because it might go back to what was in the past. I would think that it's a good question to bring to the Sanhedrin when after we succeed in creating a Sanhedrin, maybe they can change that decision. I'm not sure that they will want to. And seriously, beyond the joking from before, and I've seen this in some source, I don't remember it, but I did see it in some source that part of the idea of the second day of Yom Tov in Galut is so that the Jews in Galut will remember that they're in Galut. It is not in the sense of, okay, good, you decide to stay, I'm going to torture you, I'm going to make you suffer. Not in that way, but in a way of understanding, of remembering that you're in Galut and that there's something wrong here, there's something missing here. And so maybe that serves a constructive purpose in that way. I don't know if anyone will want to change that in the future. Maybe it's so that the Jews in Galut will put a lot of pressure on the Jews in Eretz Yisrael to respect one another and create a Sanhedrin so they can change that for their brethren in Galut.
Good answer.
It's also possible that
Yes, Tova, go ahead.
it's also possible that they wanted to make sure that the 2 days covered the 1 day in Israel.
Yeah, but I don't understand that because it's backwards, I think. Because if you're going to do that, you should start celebrating both arguments. You should start celebrating the day before. I mean,
I'm sorry, that's
you're waiting until somebody announces that it's the holiday. You're late, so now you celebrate 2 days, so you're even later. No, really. I
have to think about it. But I'm sorry. It was a side point, so we're not going to. But it is a good example of the fact that we make a great effort to retain one calendar for Am Yisrael. That's very important. I have to give you another example of this. During World War II, during the Shoah, there were Jews who fled from Russia they kept on going as far east as they could, and from Siberia and to Japan. I don't remember his name. Maybe somebody remembers his name. There was a Japanese consul in something like that.
Yeah, he was
So
a
that's
rescue. He was a rescue.
yes, he was recognized as a righteous amongst the
Yes,
nations.
I forgot his name.
Who was instructed not to give Jews visas or whatever it was to go to Japan, but he did against his authorities, and he allowed a lot of Jews to go, and they ended up in Japan. There was a Jewish community in Japan. There was Yeshivat Mir, that the students got to Japan, and then the question of the date line, because somewhere between the east of Asia and the west of the United States of the Americas, I shouldn't say the States, of North and South America, somewhere there is the date line that decides that we move from the last hour of one day to the first hour of the next day. Every certain part of the planet is a different hour. And then they asked the halachic question: where is the date line between the uh, I'm looking for a term for the land, okay, like China and so on, and Japan, which is an island. Is the date line between the mainland and Japan, or somewhere in the Pacific beyond Japan? Because that will make a decision which day is Yom Kippur. And they sent a question to Eretz Yisrael, and there was a chief rabbi, Arav Herzog, who was a Zionist, and there was a different rabbi whose name I'm not going to mention now. He's a very important rabbi, but he wasn't willing to let Arav Herzog make the decision. And they made two different decisions. And they sent two different answers to the Jews in Japan. And there were Jews in Japan at that time who fasted 2 days because they heard of the two different decisions and they fasted 2 days. So that's an example of what happens when we can't make a unified decision. So we have to make unified decisions. Of course, it doesn't mean that all decisions have to be unified. We can have issues on which we don't make unified decisions. And that is going to be part of our discussion. I'm going to continue another source that you have on the sheets. It's the same idea, but it's in the Rambam, in Maimonides, bringing this source that we studied in his compilation of Halakha and the Mishneh Torah, but he adds something to the discussion. Let's see the Rambam. He says the following. This is brought in Hilchot Mamrim. Hilchot Mamrim includes two topics. One is Hilchot Sanhedrin, the halachot of how the Sanhedrin, the high court, functions, and the other is Kibud Av Va'em. It seems to be two very different. It seems to be. I made a mistake. 1 second. It seems to be. 1 second. What did I do? Okay, seems okay. In any case, okay. In any case, both of these, both Sanhedrin and respecting one's parents, Kibud Av Va'em, are issues of institutions of authority in the community and respecting them. So he brought those two together. In any case, the Rambam says the following. And he's quoting this source that we saw, but he's also commenting on it. The Supreme Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, someone's computer is making noise. So if you can mute it, that would be beneficial for all of us. The Supreme Sanhedrin in Jerusalem are the essence of the oral law, meaning the Torah shebichtav, the written law, the 5 books of the Torah and the Nevi'im and so on, that's decided on. We don't need the Sanhedrin to tell us what's written in the Torah. It's written in the Torah. The Sanhedrin are those who make the decisions about the oral law, how we carry out the law of the Torah. They are the pillars of instruction from whom statutes and judgments issue forth for the entire Jewish people. The Rambam quotes the pasuk in Dvarim, "You shall do according to the laws which they shall instruct you." In Hebrew, "V'asita al pi hadavar asher yorucha." This is a positive commandment, mitzvat aseh. You should act according to the laws that the Sanhedrin decides. Once again, go back to the discussion, to the argument. Once they make a vote and a law is accepted, you have to follow that law. Halakha number 2, any person who does not carry out the directive transgresses a negative commandment. As the psukim continue, do not deviate from any of the statements they relate to you, neither right nor left. Lo tasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yamin u'shmol. You have to follow, and if you don't follow their decisions and you deviate from them, right or left in any direction, you transgress a negative commandment. So it's also a positive commandment, mitzvat aseh, and also a negative commandment not to deviate from their decisions, mitzvat lo ta'aseh. And the Rambam, I skipped a lot of it, and he brings the whole description that we, even in the Gemara, we skipped it as well, but the whole description of how a new question arises, they come to the local court, they end up going to the high court. If they know, they tell us. If not, they study the issue, they make a vote, and they reach a decision. Says the Rambam, there can never be any difference of opinion with regards to matters received through the oral tradition. If it's a matter of tradition, there will not be dispute about it. Maybe the lower courts don't know the tradition, but those sages who are in the great Sanhedrin in Beit HaMikdash, they are the ones who have the direct line of the oral tradition. So if no one else knows, they know. So if they disagree and there's a disagreement, it's not something that was passed down through the oral tradition. Whenever there arises a difference of opinion with regard to a matter, that shows that it was not received in the tradition from Moses, our teacher. It is inevitably a new question, a question that was not decided in the tradition, and therefore there is a difference of opinion. And then what do we do with regards to matters derived through logical analysis? So they start a discussion, and you can come up with different decisions. We follow the majority. When the Supreme Sanhedrin was in session, now he goes back to the source that we were studying. There were never, notice this, there were never any prolonged differences of opinion amongst the Jewish people. You notice the difference? It doesn't say there were not disputes. There were not prolonged differences of opinion among the Jewish people. Instead, if a doubt arose in a Jew's mind over any law, he would inquire of the court in his city. And as we saw the short version of the description in the Gemara, they went to the next court and to the next court. Everyone comes to the Supreme Sanhedrin and they make a decision. After the Supreme Sanhedrin was nullified, differences of opinion multiplied among the Jewish people. So the Rambam doesn't stress here the disciples of Shammai and Hillel who were, what was the term? Who insufficiently studied. He says that it's the problem of the main court. As long as we had a main court that everyone adhered to,
Oh, yes.
and there was
Yeah, right.
then there was one Torah for Am Yisrael. And there were differences, but they were not prolonged differences, because you could argue about it and you could raise claims about it and you can bring it to the high court, to the great Sanhedrin of Am Yisrael. But at some point they reached a decision, they made a vote, the argument ended, the bringing opinions and proofs and claims was stopped, and they made a vote, and there was a decision that everyone had to accept because of the deterioration and the strength of our people as a nation, as a people, because the situation in Eretz Yisrael deteriorated and weakened and got weaker and weaker and weaker. And weaker and weaker and weaker, and other places outside of Eretz Yisrael got stronger. And we actually became dispersed in different places outside of Eretz Yisrael. That caused us, that damaged the unity of the Torah within Am Yisrael. So this is the first step that we're not going to be able to continue tonight. Our time is ending. And I would like to reach many more sources. There are many more sources waiting for us. If I try to sum up what we've seen today, is we did discuss some, we didn't discuss it, we mentioned some positive sources, many positive sources in our tradition about diversity of opinions. But what we've studied today is the importance of keeping the Torah as one Torah. And the way to do that is through the high court, the great Sanhedrin in Beit HaMikdash. And since for 2,000 years we have been without this Sanhedrin, maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe it's for 1,700 years that we're without a Sanhedrin. So there is a danger of the Torah becoming two Torot or many more than two Torot. I would even dare to say that it's wondrous. Maybe it's not exaggerated to say that it's a miracle that we've actually kept one Torah. You look at the Ethiopian Jews, they were disconnected from Am Yisrael in the first temple, the time of Beit HaMikdash HaRishon. So some of the decisions that were made by the Sanhedrin in the second temple, in the time of the second temple, they didn't have. So when they reunited with Am Yisrael, which is a miracle in of itself, the prophet Yeshayahu describes the gathering of the exiles. One of the places that he describes that Jews will return from is Cush, which is Ethiopia. So it's amazing that prophecy from 2,700 years ago has come true. but they come back with differences in tradition. I have a very beloved friend, a very leading figure in of putting together Ethiopian tradition and the way halakha is carried out in Am Yisrael in history. His name is Arav Sharon Shalom. You may have encountered him at some point. Maybe sometime we should bring him as a guest to Kino David. He's a great guy. He's a very funny person. And one of the things he's done, he wrote a book about how it's possible to keep some of the unique Ethiopian traditions within what is accepted halakha. Maybe make a little room for a little more flexibility so we can include some of Ethiopian tradition without making the Ethiopians break away from their Jewish tradition and so on. And so it's a very interesting description, a very interesting idea that he brings down in this book. I have the book at home. If anyone is interested in seeing it, has it been published in English? I'm not sure. I have it in Hebrew. Probably was translated and published in English. I could ask him. If anyone is interested, tell me and I'll ask him.
Yes,
Yes, we've got it.
yeah, we've got it, and we saw him when he spoke at Matan.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. So the Nadels have the book in English, so you can ask them if they can help you find it, or if they, if you want to see the book. In any case, besides that, the traditions vary. The minhagim, the customs vary in many ways, but in an astonishing way, we've kept the backbone of Judaism. I give the example of tefillah, tefillat Amidah. It's the same. It's called tefillat Shmoneh Esrei, which is 18, and it has 19 brachot,
19.
because the original tefillah was 18, and then they added one on. And
Aminim,
all
Aminim.
of the communities, all the other communities of Jews around the world, from Taiman to North Africa to Asia, to Europe, to the Americas, wherever, have the same 19 brachot. There are differences in words. There are differences in pronunciation. But you can go to a Yemenite shul, which is the farthest away from Ashkenazi, and you won't understand the pronunciation. But if you look at the Siddur, you'll see that they're saying Tfilat Hamidah. So, and it's so important. It keeps us together. I don't mean that there's no room for diversity, but I intentionally wanted to start with, I think we're very liberal people, and we make room for diversity. We understand, we identify with the blessing of diversity. So I wanted to balance that in a way. We're starting off with the importance of a framework of unity, of keeping Am Yisrael as one Torah and not two Torot, and it has implications for making halacha decisions as a rabbi, as a leader of the community. How far can we go? How far? Sometimes even if I think sometimes something is right, I will say, wait a minute, I don't want to break up the unity of the Jewish community. How far can we take that? This is very intricate, so we've started the topic, and we will continue to discuss it, Be'ezrat Hashem, 2 weeks from now.
Thank you very much.
Shal Koch, thank you, everyone.
Thank
very
you.
much. I'm very happy
Thank
that
you.
you're here. Laila Tov.
Bye, Leila.